So how can I stop stress eating? I have actually been doing this a little bit recently, so I need to take some of this advice.
Yeah, so stressful times, things going on in the world, or just a stressful lifestyle, right? You just have a lot going on. Summertime, maybe you've got kids in sports. There's so many reasons that we end up stressed, feeling overwhelmed. And first of all, it's completely natural for you to turn to food for comfort. Because what
Yeah.
does food do in our brain?
Well, it provides some little bit of dopamine, which is something that can kind of calm you down or perk you up, just depending. And it feels good. It's an immediate escape.
Yeah, so first of all, kind of let go of that guilt. But the problem is we stress eat and then we feel guilty about it, right? So we
Right.
stress eat, we overeat, we feel guilty about it. So we get guilty and frustrated. And so what does that do? It increases our stress level.
So it's a vicious cycle, a self-feeding cycle that typically just gets worse and worse and worse until you come to the realization of what you're actually doing.
Right. So to answer this question, I want to first kind of ask your permission. Like, can I give you some straight talk or some tough love? So type yes in the comments below if I can answer this comment very directly. So you have to take steps to deal with the stress because eating isn't going to fix the stress. Just like drinking alcohol isn't going to fix the stress, right? I mean, you think alcohol can be addictive, eating can be addictive, kind of the same cycle, but it doesn't fix the problem. It makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
So how do you get your stress under control? Because that's the answer. That's the real answer. It's not how do you control yourself when you're stressed. It's how can you get that stress under control.
Yeah, and some people find that different things work for them. So either getting more control over the situation. So food logging is a great way to get more control. So if it goes in your mouth, it goes into a food log, and you want to log it before you eat it. So that's one way to gain more control. Or you can decide to relinquish a little bit of control. And by doing that, you can do something like exercise, something relaxing, get some yoga in, go for a walk, get outside and get some vitamin D, get some of that sunshine that's out right now.
Yeah, so also, I want to go back to the food logging. So one thing food logging does is it forces you to stop and think. So you talk a lot about the moment between the moments.
Yeah, I always describe it as the moment between the moments because I don't really know how else to describe it. And it's that feeling like you slip into this thought process and part of your day where you're like, something's about to happen, and I'm in between the moment where I would just automatically do it and when I still have a little bit of control. And when you're thinking about that control, that's the moment between moments. That's when you're making a decision rather than just putting yourself on autopilot. And the more and more you do that, the more and more control you get over yourself, over your emotions, over your patterns. So
Yeah, so the other thing is get the junk food out of the house. So if it's something that you're snacking on all the time, whether it's keto friendly or not keto friendly, either way, don't have that just sitting around. Or if you do have it, put it into single portion baggies, and then put a date on each baggie.
And it can even be keto food that's necessarily bad for you because of an addictive quality. For me, like I could even say like macadamia nuts could be a real problem for me, like in a big way because
Because you can eat a lot of them.
like a 12 is a serving, 12 macadamia nuts. I could eat 40 or 50 in a setting very easily and not even really think about it. And to me, that's almost an addictive quality of macadamia nuts. I just love them so much. So I need to be in control of that and realize that even something that is healthy for me can be unhealthy for me in large quantities.
So many of us have children and we buy them special treats from time to time. So one trick you can do is don't buy them things you like to eat. So I had to catch myself just yesterday. I was doing an Instacart order to Sam's Club, and we have his birthday's coming up. We're kind of planning a 4th of July celebration, and this is probably the only Sam's Club trip that's going to happen. And so I had thought, oh, the kids really like M&Ms and mini Snickers bars, and I had them in my cart. And then I thought about it, and I thought, no, because if those are in the house, my brain knows they're in the house. Right? So even if you have stuff like that in the house that you like, and some of those are some of our favorite, candies, right? So I took them out of the cart. I didn't even get them. And I told Jeremy, I said, hey, I was thinking I was going to get the kids these things, but then I realized how bad of an idea that was.
Yeah.
And setting me up for, doing something that I would not be feeling well about, right? So it's about thinking about that. And one thing that really helped me early on when I was coming off of candy and a lot of processed carbohydrates was thinking about where I'm spending my money. Right? If you think about every dollar you spend is a vote that you're giving the food industry. It's a signal, right, about what you want to have available. So if you can use the moment between the moments concept and apply that to every dollar you spend, that can help you change your spending behavior.
Yeah, when you really think of your dollars as votes, it really changes because, we only get to vote so often throughout the year or throughout the years. And when that time comes around, it's kind of really precious to give away your vote to somebody, right? So when you start thinking about your money as a vote for something, then it's just a different way of thinking about it. But it becomes a little bit more precious and important to you what you're doing with those votes. So it's a great concept.
So the next tip is to join a paid support group. So why do you guys think a paid support group is important? Put that thought in the comments. Do you want to go into this? You want me to cover it?
So I was having a problem about a year and a half ago where I had stopped working out. I had stopped exercising. I had just decided that I didn't have enough time in my day to do it, and I just quit. And then we started sending our girls to a gym to do some workouts for some athletic stuff that they were in at the time. And I kind of got excited seeing what they were doing, and they had an adult program. And I was like, I've got all this equipment at home, and if I would just use it, I would save myself this money. But spending the money is the thing that got me to go, right? I spent the money, so I'm darn well going to use that because there's money going out the door. And so now that I've invested in something, then I'm going to show up for myself so I'm not wasting money. I actually heard a story about a wealthy guy that was going to CrossFit, and his gym owner would tell him, what do I have to do to get you here? Because he was charging the guy $150 a month, and for this guy, $150 a month was pennies. Nothing. He didn't care. And the guy actually told the gym owner, he says, charge me more. He told him, charge me more and I'll come. Because it's a motivating factor. It really is. If you're spending money on something, then you're going to show up for it.
Yeah. So we do have a membership group. We do have a group coaching group, but maybe ours isn't right for you. Find one that fits for you. There is a link to our membership group if you want to check that out in the comments. But this is not an advertisement for that group, so we're going to move on. All right, so sometimes we eat emotionally or stress eat because we're bored. We find ourselves just, I don't have anything to do, so I guess I'm hungry, and so it becomes entertainment. So a great thing to do is to start a new hobby. So have any of you guys started new hobbies with this whole quarantine things? Put your hobbies in the comments, and that will help other people get some ideas. So we'll run through some just real brief ones that we came up with. I'll let you start.
Gardening, building something. We built a retaining wall for some landscaping, and then I was like, oh, my project's done. Now I'm sad. But I'm going to go on and build something else for the deck, like a storage thing. I've seen Tara doing some more sewing, for masks and for weighted blankets and things like that.
So things like active things like rollerblading, right?
Yeah, I got rollerblades again, and I went out, and yeah.
So one of our teenagers had been going on longer bike rides. We live near a really nice trail. So like trampoline jumping or swimming,
If you have I'm going to do laps in my kiddie pool.
Yeah, our teenagers bought themselves like a little kiddie pool, right? So that they could sit out on the lawn and cool off. So other things, like if you're stuck indoors, and this is like active things you can do indoors. So things like yoga, kickboxing, dance, Pilates, stretching. You can invest in some indoor exercise equipment to get your body moving.
You can try and get TikTok famous or YouTube famous
Yeah,
or whatever kind of famous you want to be.
See if we have any
sewing masks.
See, Edward's starting a Mandarin class next week. So yeah, learning new languages, like online cooking classes, all kinds of different things. Sharon is sewing masks for other people, picking up her crafts, and doing family history. Yeah, it's a great time to maybe look into family history. I've seen people doing the genetic tests, 23andMe, and sometimes that will even connect you with family you didn't know you had.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a lost art, like genealogy. Like, I remember going with my grandfather to cemeteries in different towns we were in and just hunting down headstones. It was
yeah, I remember doing that with my grandma. Yeah. So, okay, so time for the next tip. So the next thing is consider getting a therapist.
But Tara, I don't need any help. I don't need a therapist.
There's so much stigma about therapy, and I am a firm believer, as is Jeremy, that everybody in the world can benefit from therapy. If you think about therapy as having someone who you can just unload to, someone who isn't going to judge you, someone who isn't going to say something negative to you, because that can happen if you're talking to your sisters or your parents or your friends, right? You can end up feeling judged or you can end up feeling ridiculed. And a therapist is a safe place to go and talk. And, I've done therapy for years.
Yeah, and I call BS on anybody, but especially men who stigmatize therapy because it takes a lot more strength and courage to go and talk with somebody who you maybe don't really know all that well about your problems than to keep it inside. And so I think it's a sign of strength to engage in therapy. Even
if you're incredibly well adjusted and you have everything together.
Yeah.
Because going to therapy, sometimes I'll walk into therapy and I'll go, I'm fine today. But we'll get to talking and 2 or 3 things will come up that I was dealing with but not really acknowledging, that was real. So therapy can be incredibly valuable. And if you find yourself stress eating and you feel like it's uncontrollable and you are just struggling with emotion, struggling with stress, can't get your feet underneath you, this is the time to seek out a therapist.
Yeah, and maybe you'll do something cool like, have you ever heard of EMDR? Tara did some EMDR.
Yep.
And that was very helpful.
Yes, very helpful. And fail forward. Reframe how you think about failure. We can look at a stress eating episode and say, oh, well, I failed. I may as well quit keto. What am I even doing here? Your brain will spiral on you. You want to talk a little bit about what happens, kind of your resiliency
it's
training?
Like, the catastrophizing, right? Like you kind of go through this cycle where something very small and bad happens, and then you let that start to build on itself. And it might just be in your head where that's building. And you think, okay, well, I had this episode where I ate a bunch of stuff that I wasn't supposed to eat, and now I'm going to gain all the weight back, and I'm going to gain all the weight back, and I'm going to get diabetes. I'm going to get diabetes, and I'm going to die. I'm going to die tomorrow. Like, I had this cake today, and I'm going to die tomorrow. Like, that's catastrophizing. And the way to kind of get through that is to take it to its logical conclusion, its illogical conclusion, which is to go, well, if I die tomorrow, then I better have a will, right? And kind of try and find ways to make light of it, to kind of recenter yourself on, okay, well, that is a little bit ridiculous. All it is some cake. So what's the worst that could happen? You can all, just continuously ask yourself, well, what's the worst that can happen? And just keep stepping through that until you get to, you just kind of like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. So it really is just cake.
Yeah. So I mentioned failure, and, we're always trying to help reframe failure because it's kind of gotten a stigma, right? When we were young, think about when you learned to walk. What would happen if you had quit and said, oh, I'm a failure, I quit, I'm never going to learn to walk. You never would have learned to walk. So failure is accepted if we're applying it to a baby, if we're applying it to a child learning how to play baseball. Do they go up to to the batter's box and just hit the first one out of the park?
No, I just stood in the outfield and just shot birds, imaginary birds with my fingers.
I mean, even, okay, professional baseball players.
Oh, yeah.
How many times do they swing at the ball? How many of those times? It's very low.
A good batting average is 300, right? Less than 1/3 of the time getting a hit. I mean, if you failed 70% of the time, you would really think you were pretty awful. But
yeah, so it's about, we have such, as adults, right? We've created such stigma and embarrassment and pain around failure. And so I want you to kind of think about that. Think about how can you view failure a little bit differently in your life? What could you do differently when you fail? Maybe instead of hiding it and beating yourself up mentally, letting that self-talk get out of control, maybe you say, okay, Tara, so you went to the store because your deep freeze quit and you bought a Snickers bar and you ate it. Well, that doesn't mean you need to go eat 6 more hamburgers.
Yeah.
That means you just get right back on, right? You learn something from that. Oh, I got stressed. I got uncomfortable. I had a Snickers bar. Okay. I'm not going to go off the deep end. I'm going to learn from that experience and move forward.
And I think one thing, especially when you're on keto or other low-carb lifestyle, telling somebody about it. Because the more you keep those things inside, even if they just happen to yourself and you've admitted them to yourself and you're okay with it, I still think that admitting it to somebody else is a way to let it out, acknowledge it, and move on.
And the safest place to do that is either in a group coaching program or with a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we hope that we've given you a whole bunch of different ways that you can help cope with stress eating or emotional eating.